My name is Ethan Rowe, and I used to think marriage was about partnership. Turns out, in 2024, partnership means coming home to find your wife practicing her fake smile in the mirror while texting someone who makes her giggle like a teenager. "Working late again tonight," Julia announced without looking up from her phone. She stood in our kitchen, all 5'6" of polished ambition, her auburn hair pulled back in that severe bun she wore when she meant business. The morning light caught the diamond ring I'd saved 6 months to buy her, back when I thought expensive gestures mattered. "Third time this week," I said, pouring coffee into my travel mug. "Must be some project." "You wouldn't understand. Marketing campaigns require creativity and dedication." Her tone carried that particular edge she'd developed lately, the one that made every conversation feel like a performance review I was failing. "I worked as an IT analyst for Meridian Solutions, fixing other people's computer problems and occasionally preventing the entire network from collapsing. Not glamorous, but it paid the bills and kept our Port Ledge apartment comfortable." Julia worked for Pinnacle Marketing, where she specialized in making ordinary products sound revolutionary and ordinary people feel inadequate. "Right," I said. "Well, have fun being creative." She finally looked up, her green eyes narrowing. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just encouraging your artistic pursuits." The sarcasm hung in the air like smoke. Julia's phone buzzed, and her expression shifted instantly from irritation to something softer, more genuine than anything she'd shown me in months. She read the message and actually smiled. "I have to go," she said, grabbing her purse and heading for the door. No kiss goodbye, no have a good day, nothing. Just the click of expensive heels on hardwood and the slam of our front door. I stood there holding my coffee, wondering when exactly my wife had become a stranger who happened to share my address. The answer came later that morning when my friend Nate stopped by my office. Nate worked in accounting 2 floors down, and he had a talent for collecting workplace gossip like some people collected stamps. "Dude, you need to hear this," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. Nate was one of those guys who stayed 34 forever through sheer determination and expensive hair products. "I was at CrossFit Apex yesterday, that place where all the corporate types go to pretend they're warriors." "The gym where Julia started working out 3 months ago?" Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. That's the one. So I'm on the treadmill, minding my own business, when I hear this conversation between 2 women. They're talking about how Dean Malice and some marketing chick have been getting real cozy in the sauna, like not just for sweating cozy. My coffee suddenly tasted like ash. "Dean Malice?" "Yeah, you know him. Works at Pinnacle. Looks like he stepped out of a protein powder commercial. Always posting those motivational quotes on social media about conquering your fears and claiming your destiny." I knew Dean. Julia had mentioned him countless times over the past few months. Her work husband, she called him. The guy who understood her professional struggles, who pushed her to demand more from life, who apparently spent a lot of time helping her with late-night projects. "Did they mention names?" I asked, though my stomach already knew the answer. "Julia. They said Julia and Dean were practically attached at the hip, coming in together, leaving together, whispering in corners like teenagers. One of them said she felt sorry for Julia's husband because everyone at the gym could see what was happening except him." The words hit me like a punch to the solar plexus. I'd suspected something was wrong, but hearing it confirmed by gym gossip made it real in a way that hurt more than I'd expected. "Maybe it's just talk," Nate said, but his expression suggested he didn't believe it any more than I did. "Maybe," I agreed, but I was already thinking about Julia's new workout clothes, her sudden interest in fitness, the way she'd started showering as soon as she got home from the gym. Little details that hadn't seemed significant individually but formed a clear picture when assembled. That evening, Julia came home at 9:30, claiming she'd grabbed dinner with the team after their strategy session. She smelled like expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine. "How was your day?" she asked, but she was already scrolling through her phone, not really interested in the answer. "Illuminating," I said. She glanced up. "What?" I said it was fine. Just the usual computer emergencies and user incompetence. She was typing now, her thumbs moving quickly across the screen. Whatever she was writing made her smile again, that secret smile I used to think was meant for me. I watched her for a moment. This woman I'd married 2 years ago, this stranger who lived in my home and shared my bed and apparently shared everything else with someone named Dean Malice. "Julia," I said. "What?" She didn't look up. "Do you want to talk about anything?" "Like what?" "I don't know. Us. How things are going." Now she looked up, and her expression was pure annoyance. "Everything's fine, Ethan. Not everything needs to be analyzed and discussed. Some of us are busy building careers." The dismissal stung, but it also clarified something I'd been avoiding. This wasn't a rough patch or a communication problem. This was Julia showing me exactly how much I mattered in her new life. "Right," I said. "Wouldn't want to interfere with your career building?" She studied my face for a moment, and I saw something calculating in her eyes. "Actually, I've been thinking. From now on, I decide when we spend time together. Stop bothering me with these random conversations and neediness. I have important things to focus on." The words landed like a slap. Not because they were cruel, though they were, but because they were so perfectly calculated to hurt. Julia had always been good at finding pressure points. "Understood," I said quietly. She nodded, satisfied, and returned to her phone. "Good. I'm glad we're on the same page." But we weren't on the same page. We weren't even reading the same book anymore. And as I sat there watching my wife text her lover, I realized that Julia had just made the biggest mistake of her life. She'd assumed I would roll over and accept whatever scraps of attention she was willing to throw my way. She'd assumed I was the same pushover who'd spent months making excuses for her behavior, who'd convinced himself that marriage required patience and understanding even when respect had left the building. She was wrong. From now on, I would decide when we talked. From now on, I would decide how this marriage ended. And from now on, Julia was going to learn that underestimating people is a dangerous game. I didn't say any of this, of course. I just nodded and went to bed early, leaving her alone with her phone and her secrets. But as I lay there listening to her muffled laughter from the living room, I began planning. Julia wanted to play games? Fine. But she'd forgotten something important about games. Someone always loses. The next morning, I did something that would have seemed impossible a week earlier. I said nothing. No good morning, no coffee offer, no attempt at conversation. I got dressed, grabbed my things, and left for work without acknowledging Julia's existence. She was still in bed, probably texting Dean about their plans for another late-night strategy session. Let her. I had my own strategy to develop. At work, I threw myself into a project that had been gathering dust on my desk, a comprehensive security audit of our client database. Boring work, but it required focus and gave me something to think about besides my disintegrating marriage. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from Julia. "Are you mad about something?" I stared at the message for a full minute, then deleted it without responding. An hour later, another text. "Ethan, what's going on? You left without saying anything." Delete. By evening, she'd sent 6 messages, each one slightly more irritated than the last. The final one read, "This silent treatment is childish. Call me." Instead, I went to Murphy's Tavern, a dive bar near my office where the beer was cheap and the lighting was dim enough to hide my mood. I ordered a burger and a beer and tried to figure out my next move. "Rough day?" The bartender, a weathered guy named Pete, had seen me nurse exactly 2 beers over the past hour. "Rough year," I said. "Woman trouble?" "Is it that obvious?" Pete shrugged. "It's always woman trouble or money trouble, and you don't look broke." My phone buzzed again. This time it was Nate. "Julia called me. She wants to know if you're okay. Says you're acting weird." I typed back, "Tell her I'm fine. Just busy with work." "Dude, what's going on?" "Nothing. Just need some space to think." I stayed at Murphy's until closing time, then drove home to find Julia waiting in the living room. She was still in her work clothes, but her perfect composure had cracks in it. "Where were you?" she demanded. "Out." "Out where?" "Does it matter?" She studied my face, looking for something. "You're acting strange, Ethan. This isn't like you." "Maybe you don't know me as well as you think." "What's that supposed to mean?" I walked past her toward the bedroom. "It means I'm tired. I'm going to bed." "We need to talk about this." I paused in the doorway. "I thought you decided when we talk now. Has that policy changed?" Her mouth opened, then closed. For the first time in months, Julia seemed genuinely surprised by something I'd said. This pattern continued for 2 weeks. I spoke to Julia only when absolutely necessary, answered her texts sporadically or not at all, and spent my evenings anywhere but home. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I was studying her reaction. The results were fascinating. By day 3, Julia's irritation had shifted to concern. By day 7, she was enlisting mutual friends to check on me. By day 10, she was showing up at my office during lunch, trying to corner me into conversation. "People are starting to notice," she said, perching on the edge of my desk like she owned it. "Nate says you've been distant with him, too." "I've been busy." "With what?" "Work, personal projects, life." She leaned forward, and I caught a whiff of that cologne again. "Ethan, if something's wrong, you can tell me. We're married. We're supposed to support each other." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. "Are we?" "Of course we are. What kind of question is that?" "Just checking. Sometimes it's hard to tell." Her green eyes flashed with something that might have been guilt, but it passed quickly. "I don't know what's gotten into you, but this attitude needs to stop. You're embarrassing both of us." "How so?" "By acting like a sulky teenager. By ignoring me in front of our friends. By disappearing every night without explanation." "Interesting," I said. "When you disappear every night for work meetings and gym sessions, that's career dedication. When I do it, it's sulky teenage behavior." "That's completely different." "Is it?" She stood up, smoothing her skirt. "I don't have time for this right now. I have a client presentation this afternoon, but when I get home tonight, we're going to sit down and work through whatever this is." "Will Dean be joining us for this conversation?" The question hit its target. Julia's face went pale, then flushed red. "What did you say?" "I asked if Dean would be joining our marriage counseling session, since he seems to be such an important part of your life these days." "I don't know what you're implying, but—" "I'm not implying anything. I'm asking a direct question. Will your work husband be available to help us work through our problems?" Julia's composure cracked completely. "You're being ridiculous. Dean is a colleague, a friend. There's nothing inappropriate about our relationship." "I didn't say there was. You did." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her mind racing, trying to figure out how much I knew and how much I was guessing. "I have to go," she said finally. "We'll discuss this later." "Will we? Or will you have another late meeting?" She left without answering, but I could see the wheels turning. Julia was smart enough to know that her secret wasn't as secret as she'd thought, but not smart enough to realize that I'd been preparing for this conversation for 2 weeks. That evening, she came home at 6:30, earlier than she'd been in months. She'd stopped at the expensive grocery store and bought ingredients for my favorite dinner, something she hadn't cooked in over a year. "I thought we could eat together tonight," she said, unpacking bags in the kitchen. "Like we used to." "What about your gym session?" "I can skip one day." "And Dean? Won't he miss his workout partner?" Julia's hand stilled on a package of pasta. "Ethan, I think we need to clear the air about some things." "Do we?" "Yes." She turned to face me, and I saw that she'd prepared for this conversation too. Her expression was open, vulnerable, designed to appeal to the man who'd spent 2 years making excuses for her behavior. "I know I've been distant lately. Work has been incredibly stressful, and I've been taking that stress out on you. That's not fair." "No, it's not." "And I know my friendship with Dean bothers you. I should have been more sensitive to that." "Should you have?" "Yes. He's just a friend, but I can see how spending time with him might make you feel uncomfortable. I'll be more mindful of that going forward." It was a good performance, sincere enough to seem genuine, specific enough to address my concerns, vague enough to avoid any real admissions. If I'd been the same man I was 3 weeks ago, it might have worked. But I wasn't that man anymore. "That's very thoughtful of you," I said. Julia smiled, relief flooding her features. "Good. I'm glad we can work through this like adults." "Absolutely. Very adult." She moved closer, reaching for my hand. "I've missed this, Ethan. I've missed us." "Have you?" "Yes. I know I haven't been the best wife lately, but I want to do better. We both deserve better." I let her take my hand, studying her face. She was beautiful. I'd give her that. Even when she was lying, Julia had a way of making you want to believe her. "I appreciate that," I said. "So we're okay?" "We're something." She squeezed my hand. "I love you, you know. Even when I'm stressed and difficult, that never changes." "Good to know." Something in my tone made her pause. "Ethan?" "Yes?" "You believe me, don't you? About Dean, about everything?" I looked into her eyes, those green eyes that had once made me forget my own name, and smiled. "Julia," I said gently, "I believe you're exactly who you've shown me you are." She frowned, trying to parse the meaning behind my words. But before she could ask for clarification, I kissed her forehead and headed for the bedroom. "I'm tired," I said. "Rain check on dinner?" I left her standing in the kitchen, surrounded by ingredients for a meal she'd never intended to cook for any reason other than damage control. And as I closed the bedroom door behind me, I allowed myself a small smile. Julia thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. She had no idea that I'd been studying the board for weeks, learning the rules of her game, preparing my own strategy. Tomorrow, the real game would begin. The next morning brought the first piece of luck I'd had in months. My boss, Mr. Phelps, called me into his office with news that Meridian had been selected to provide tech support for the annual Portledge Fitness Expo, a weekend-long event that drew trainers, influencers, and fitness enthusiasts from across the region. "It's good exposure for us," Phelps said, adjusting his glasses. "Plus, the overtime pay won't hurt. You interested?" "Absolutely." I was more interested than he could possibly know. The Fitness Expo was being held at the Convention Center downtown, and according to the event schedule, Dean Malice was one of the featured speakers. He'd be giving a presentation on maximizing your physical and mental potential to a crowd of fitness fanatics and aspiring influencers. Perfect. I spent the next week preparing, not just the technical setup for the expo, but research into Dean's background, his social media presence, his habits, and his weaknesses. What I found was exactly what I'd expected: a walking collection of fitness cliches and motivational platitudes, packaged in an artificially enhanced physique and an ego the size of a small planet. Dean's Instagram was a masterpiece of narcissism. Shirtless gym photos, inspirational quotes overlaid on sunset images, videos of him lifting weights while delivering speeches about conquering fear and claiming your destiny. He had 40,000 followers who hung on his every word about protein intake and personal transformation. But the most interesting thing I discovered was Dean's obsession with his image. Every photo was perfectly staged, every post carefully crafted to maintain his brand as a fitness guru and life coach. His reputation was everything to him, which made it the perfect target. The expo opened on a Friday morning with a keynote speech from a former NFL player turned motivational speaker. I spent the day troubleshooting microphone issues and making sure the projection systems worked properly, all while keeping an eye on Dean's schedule. He arrived around noon, rolling up to the convention center in a silver BMW that probably cost more than I made in a year. Dean looked exactly like his photos. 6'2", artificially tan, with the kind of muscles that came from spending 4 hours a day in the gym and taking supplements that probably weren't FDA approved. "You must be the tech guy," he said when I introduced myself. His handshake was aggressive, designed to establish dominance. "I need everything perfect for my presentation tomorrow. This is a big opportunity for me." "I understand completely," I said. "We'll make sure everything runs smoothly." Dean's presentation was scheduled for Saturday afternoon, prime time for the expo's main stage. He'd be speaking to an audience of about 500 people, with the event being live-streamed to his social media followers. The topic was his specialty: overcoming obstacles and achieving peak performance. Friday evening, I made my first move. Dean had a routine, according to my research. Every morning before a big presentation, he consumed a protein smoothie made with his signature blend of supplements. He was obsessive about it, posting photos of his morning fuel and talking about how proper nutrition was the foundation of success. The expo provided a hospitality suite for speakers, complete with a refrigerator and blender for their convenience. Dean had already stocked his section with his preferred ingredients, labeled with his name and organized with military precision. I waited until the security guard made his rounds, then slipped into the hospitality suite with a small bag of supplies. Dean's protein powder was exactly where I expected it to be, in a container marked "Dean, do not touch." I opened the container and added a carefully measured amount of magnesium citrate, a common over-the-counter supplement that was perfectly safe in normal doses but had one notable side effect. It was an extremely effective laxative. The beauty of magnesium citrate was that it was tasteless, odorless, and would take about 30 minutes to take effect. Just enough time for Dean to consume his smoothie, take the stage, and begin his presentation on achieving peak performance. Saturday morning, I arrived early to do final checks on all the equipment. Dean showed up an hour before his presentation, looking confident and relaxed. He went through his usual routine: dynamic warm-up, meditation, and finally, his signature protein smoothie. I watched from the tech booth as he blended his morning fuel, added his usual ingredients, and drank the entire thing in 3 long gulps. Then he spent 20 minutes doing vocal warm-ups and reviewing his notes, completely unaware that his body was about to betray him in the most public way possible. The main auditorium was packed by the time Dean took the stage. 500 people in the audience, thousands more watching the live stream, all eager to hear about maximizing their potential. Dean started strong. He was a natural performer, working the crowd with practiced ease, building energy with his opening stories about overcoming adversity and pushing past limitations. "The only limits that exist," he declared, striding across the stage with confidence, "are the ones we accept in our minds. When you truly commit to excellence, when you refuse to settle for mediocrity, your body will follow where your mind leads." The audience was eating it up. People were nodding, taking notes, recording videos on their phones. Dean was in his element, feeding off the energy of the crowd. Then, about 15 minutes into his presentation, I saw the first sign of trouble: a slight shift in his posture, a momentary pause in his delivery. Dean's expression flickered with confusion, then concern. "The key to transformation," he continued, but his voice had lost some of its power, "is understanding that comfort zones are where dreams go to." He stopped mid-sentence, his face going pale. The audience waited, thinking it was a dramatic pause. Dean tried to continue, but another wave of intestinal distress hit him, and this time he couldn't hide it. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice strained, "I need to take a brief intermission." He started walking toward the side of the stage, trying to maintain his composure, but his body had other plans. The magnesium citrate was doing exactly what it was designed to do, and Dean's commitment to excellence was about to be tested in ways he'd never imagined. He made it about halfway to the exit before nature took over. The sound system picked up his involuntary groan of distress, amplifying it for the entire audience. Then came the sounds that would haunt Dean's social media presence for months to come. The audience sat in stunned silence as their fitness guru doubled over on stage, his face contorted with embarrassment and physical distress. Someone in the front row started recording with their phone. Then someone else. Within seconds, dozens of people were capturing Dean's humiliation for posterity. He tried to run for the exit, but his legs weren't cooperating. The laxative had hit him with full force, and there was nothing he could do but surrender to the inevitable. Dean Malice, motivational speaker and fitness influencer, lost control of his bowels in front of 500 people and a live stream audience of thousands. The video went viral within hours. Our fitness guru and Hajj peak performance started trending on social media, along with clips of Dean's catastrophic presentation. The comments were merciless. "This is what happens when you're full of it." Talk about a crappy presentation. I guess his body followed where his mind led after all. By Sunday morning, the video had been viewed over 2 million times. Dean's carefully crafted image as a fitness authority was destroyed, replaced by his new reputation as the guy who had explosive diarrhea on stage. I felt a deep satisfaction watching the fallout unfold. This was just the beginning, but it was a perfect start. Dean's ego had been shattered as publicly and thoroughly as possible, and the best part was that he had no idea why it had happened. But I wasn't done with either of them. This was just the opening move in a much larger game, and Julia's turn was coming soon. My phone buzzed with a text from her. "Did you see what happened to Dean at that fitness expo? It's all over social media. I feel so bad for him." I typed back, "Saw the video? That's rough. Guess everyone has bad days." He's completely humiliated. His career might be over. Maybe he should have been more careful about what he consumed. There was a long pause before her response. "What do you mean?" "Nothing specific, just that sometimes our choices have unexpected consequences." Another pause, then, "Are you coming home for dinner tonight?" "Probably not. I have some personal projects to work on." "What kind of projects?" I smiled as I typed my response. "The kind that require patience and careful planning. You know how it is when you're really committed to excellence." I could almost feel her confusion through the phone. Julia was starting to realize that something had changed, but she didn't understand what or how much. She was about to find out. The game was just getting started. Monday morning brought news that Dean had canceled all his upcoming speaking engagements and deleted his social media accounts. The Fitness Expo incident had destroyed his credibility overnight, and he was apparently trying to disappear from public view until the humiliation died down. But I wasn't going to let him hide. Through my research, I discovered that Dean had an ex-girlfriend named Bree, who still harbored considerable resentment about their breakup 6 months earlier. According to her social media posts, Dean had dumped her for being too needy and not supportive of his goals. She'd been posting passive-aggressive comments about him ever since. Bree worked as a personal trainer at Elite Fitness, a competing gym across town from CrossFit Apex. She had her own Instagram following and a reputation for not backing down from confrontations, perfect for what I had in mind. I created a fake email account and sent Bree a message with an interesting piece of information, photos of Dean and Julia together at various locations around town, including some particularly cozy shots from the gym sauna. I'd been collecting these images for weeks, taking them myself and gathering others from social media posts by gym members who'd captured Dean and Julia in the background of their workout selfies. The email was simple. "Thought you should know what Dean's been up to lately. Looks like he found someone new to support his goals." Bree's response was everything I'd hoped for and more. Within hours, she'd posted a series of Instagram stories exposing Dean's affair with Julia. She included the photos I'd sent, along with her own commentary about Dean's pattern of using women and discarding them when they became inconvenient. "This is Dean Malice," she wrote over a photo of him and Julia leaving the gym together. Fitness influencer, motivational speaker, and serial cheater. He told me I wasn't supportive enough of his dreams. Turns out his dreams included hooking up with married women while pretending to be a relationship expert. The posts were shared hundreds of times within the first hour. Dean's humiliation was now complete. Not only was he the guy who had explosive diarrhea on stage, he was also a homewrecker who preyed on married women. But the real target of this attack wasn't Dean. It was Julia. Her phone started ringing around noon. Friends, co-workers, acquaintances who'd seen Bree's posts and recognized Julia from the photos. By evening, the gossip had spread through both her workplace and our social circle like wildfire. Julia came home that night looking shell-shocked. Her perfect composure was completely gone, replaced by panic and desperation. "We need to talk," she said as soon as I walked through the door. "Do we?" "Yes. There are some rumors going around, and I need you to hear the truth from me." I settled into my favorite chair and waited. Julia paced in front of me, her hands shaking slightly as she tried to find the right words. "Someone posted some photos online," she began. "Photos of me and Dean together. They're trying to make it look like something it isn't." "What does it look like?" "Like we're having an affair." "Are you?" The direct question stopped her pacing. She turned to face me, her eyes wide with what looked like genuine fear. "No," she said. "Ethan, I swear to you, there's nothing romantic between Dean and me. We're friends. We work out together sometimes, that's all." "The photos suggest otherwise." "The photos are misleading. They're taken out of context." I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Bree's Instagram page. "This one shows you and Dean leaving a hotel together last Tuesday. What's the context there?" Julia's face went white. "We had a business meeting. The client wanted to meet at the hotel restaurant. At 9 p.m.? It was the only time that worked for everyone's schedule." "Who was the client?" "What?" "The client you met with at the hotel restaurant. What's their name?" Julia's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. It's confidential. I can't discuss client details." "How convenient." She moved closer, desperation creeping into her voice. "Ethan, please. You have to believe me. I would never cheat on you. I love you." "Do you?" "Yes, more than anything." "Then why did you tell me that you decide when we spend time together? Why have you been treating me like an inconvenience for months?" "I was stressed. I said things I didn't mean." "Which things didn't you mean? The part about me bothering you with neediness, or the part about having important things to focus on?" Julia sat down across from me, tears forming in her eyes. It was another good performance, but I'd seen this show before. "I meant all of it," she said quietly. "I've been horrible to you, and I'm sorry. I let work stress and my friendship with Dean make me forget what really matters." "Your friendship with Dean?" "Yes, and I can see now that it was inappropriate. I should have maintained better boundaries." "What kind of boundaries?" "Professional ones, personal ones. I should never have let our friendship affect my marriage." I studied her face, watching the calculation behind her tears. Julia was trying to find the magic words that would make this problem disappear, that would convince me to ignore the evidence and accept her version of reality. "So you're saying you'll end your friendship with Dean?" "If that's what it takes to save our marriage, yes." "And you'll be completely honest with me from now on?" "Absolutely." "No more late nights, no more mysterious meetings, no more secrets?" "None. I'll be completely transparent." I nodded slowly, as if considering her offer. "That's a big change." "I'm ready to make it. We're worth fighting for, Ethan." "Are we?" "Yes. I know I haven't acted like it lately, but you're the most important thing in my life." It was beautifully done. The right amount of remorse, the perfect balance of vulnerability and determination. If I hadn't known the truth about Julia's character, I might have been moved by her performance. Instead, I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street below. "I appreciate you saying that." "So we can work through this?" "We can try." Relief flooded her voice. "Thank you. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I promise I won't waste it." "I hope not." She came up behind me, placing her hand on my shoulder. "I love you, Ethan. I know I haven't shown it well lately, but that's never changed." I turned to face her, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for Julia. She had no idea what was coming, no concept of how thoroughly her world was about to collapse. "I love you too," I said, and technically it wasn't a lie. I loved the woman I'd married, the woman I'd thought Julia was. I just finally understood the person had never really existed. Julia smiled and kissed me, probably thinking she'd successfully managed another crisis. She went to bed that night believing she'd convinced me to ignore the evidence of my own eyes, to accept her lies and move forward as if nothing had happened. She was wrong. While Julia slept, I sat in the living room planning my next move. The photos Bree had posted were just the beginning. I had much more damaging evidence, and I was going to use every piece of it. Julia thought she could manipulate her way out of consequences, that her tears and promises would be enough to make me forget months of lies and betrayal. She was about to learn that some games have rules she didn't understand, and some opponents don't play by the same rules she did. Tomorrow, the war would escalate in ways she couldn't imagine. The next few days passed in an eerie calm. Julia made a show of coming home earlier, cooking dinner, and being the attentive wife she'd never actually been. She thought she'd successfully manipulated me back into compliance, that her performance had bought her time to figure out her next move. She was right about needing time, but she was wrong about having it. Wednesday evening, while Julia was in the shower, her phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at the screen and saw Dean's name, along with a preview of his message. "We need to meet. This is getting out of hand." Perfect timing. I used Julia's fingerprint to unlock her phone and scrolled through her message history with Dean. What I found was even more damaging than I'd expected. Not just evidence of their affair, but detailed discussions about their plans for my future. "Ethan's getting suspicious," Julia had written 3 weeks earlier. "We need to be more careful." Dean's response, "Or we need to accelerate our timeline. You said he has that history of depression, right?" "In college, yeah. Why?" "Maybe it's time for a relapse. Stress can do funny things to people's mental state." The conversation continued, laying out a plan that made my stomach turn. They'd been working together to gaslight me, to make me appear unstable and unreliable. The goal was to have me involuntarily committed for psychiatric evaluation, giving Julia power of attorney over our joint assets and the freedom to divorce me while I was unable to defend myself. It was diabolical, calculating, and completely illegal. It was also exactly the ammunition I needed for the final phase of my revenge. I took screenshots of every incriminating message, then carefully placed Julia's phone back where I'd found it. When she emerged from the shower, I was sitting on the bed reading a book, the picture of domestic tranquility. "Everything okay?" she asked, toweling her hair. "Perfect," I said. "Just enjoying a quiet evening at home." She smiled, probably thinking her plan was working perfectly. "I'm glad we're getting back to normal." "Me too?" Thursday morning, I called in sick to work and spent the day making preparations. I contacted a lawyer, a private investigator, and a computer security specialist. By afternoon, I had everything I needed for Julia and Dean's final confrontation. The weather forecast called for thunderstorms that evening, which seemed appropriately dramatic for what I had planned. Julia came home at her usual time, still maintaining her facade of reformed behavior. "How are you feeling?" she asked, playing the concerned wife. "You looked a little pale this morning." "Just tired," I said, "but I'm feeling better now." We had dinner together, making small talk about our days. Julia was relaxed, confident, probably thinking she'd successfully navigated the crisis and could begin implementing the next phase of her plan. Around 8 o'clock, my doorbell rang. "Expecting someone?" Julia asked. "Not really." I opened the door to find Dean standing in the hallway, soaked from the rain that had started falling an hour earlier. He looked terrible, unshaven, hollow-eyed, clearly struggling with the aftermath of his public humiliation. "I need to talk to both of you," he said. Julia appeared behind me, her face going pale when she saw Dean. "What are you doing here?" "Trying to figure out how everything went so wrong so fast." I stepped aside, gesturing for him to come in. "By all means, let's talk." Dean entered our apartment, dripping rainwater on the hardwood floor. The storm outside was picking up intensity, with thunder rolling across the sky and lightning illuminating the windows. "This is all connected," Dean said, pacing in our living room. "The expo, the photos, everything. Someone's been playing games with us." "What kind of games?" I asked innocently. "Someone wanted to destroy my reputation, to expose my relationship with Julia. This didn't happen by accident." Julia was staring at Dean with a mixture of panic and fury. "You shouldn't be here. If someone sees you—" "My career is already over," Dean snapped. "Thanks to whoever set me up at that expo." "Set you up how?" "The protein powder. Someone tampered with it, added something that made me sick. It was sabotage." I maintained my expression of mild interest. "That's a serious accusation. Do you have any proof?" Not yet, but I'm going to find out who did this. And when I do—" "When you do, what?" I interrupted. "You'll confront them, make them pay, use your extensive network of fitness influencers to destroy their reputation?" Something in my tone made Dean stop pacing. He looked at me more carefully, studying my face. "You know something," he said. "I know lots of things. For instance, I know about your plan to have me committed for psychiatric evaluation." The words hit both Dean and Julia like physical blows. so Julia's face went white, while Dean's mouth fell open in shock. "I don't know what you're talking about," Julia said quickly. I pulled out my phone and began reading from the screenshots I'd taken. "Ethan's getting suspicious. We need to be more careful, or we need to accelerate our timeline. You said he has that history of depression, right? Maybe it's time for a relapse." Julia sank into the nearest chair, all pretense abandoned. Dean stood frozen in the middle of the room, realizing that his entire world was collapsing around him. "You went through my phone," Julia whispered. "I did, and I found some fascinating reading material. Did you know that conspiracy to commit fraud is a felony, or that attempting to have someone falsely committed is both illegal and grounds for divorce?" Thunder crashed outside, and the lights flickered. The storm was directly overhead now, turning our confrontation into something from a Gothic novel. "You don't understand," Dean said desperately. "Julia and I, we're in love. We were trying to find a way to be together without hurting you." By having me declared mentally incompetent and stealing my assets? It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. I stood up, moving to the window where lightning was illuminating the storm clouds. "You wanted to destroy my life so you could build yours on the wreckage. The only problem is that you underestimated your opponent." "Ethan," Julia said, her voice shaking, "we can work this out. We can find a solution that works for everyone." "Can we? What kind of solution did you have in mind?" "I don't know. Counseling, maybe. Or we could separate amicably. Divide everything fairly. Like you were planning to do when I was locked in a psychiatric facility?" Another flash of lightning, followed immediately by thunder. The storm was right on top of us now, and the power flickered again. "You sabotaged me," Dean said, finally putting the pieces together. "At the expo, with the photos, everything. You've been planning this for weeks. Months, actually. Ever since Julia decided that she would control when we spend time together." "You're insane," Julia said. "Am I? Let's find out." I pulled out my laptop and opened a video chat application. I've invited some friends to join our conversation. The screen filled with familiar faces. Julia's boss, Dean's former business partners, several mutual friends, and Julia's mother. They were all logged in to what they thought was an emergency video call about Julia's well-being. "What are you doing?" Julia gasped. "Providing transparency. You said you wanted to be completely honest from now on. Here's your chance." I turned the laptop so the camera captured both Julia and Dean, then began reading from their text messages. The entire conversation about gaslighting me, having me committed, and stealing our assets. Every detail of their affair, their lies, their manipulation. The people on the video call listened in stunned silence as I systematically destroyed both Julia's reputation and Dean's remaining credibility. Julia tried to object, to provide context or explanation, but the evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. "This is revenge," she said finally, tears streaming down her face. "You're destroying our lives out of spite." "I'm revealing the truth about who you really are. There's a difference." Dean tried to leave, but I blocked his path to the door. "Where are you going? The conversation isn't over." "Get out of my way." "Or what? You'll have me committed?" The confrontation escalated quickly. Dean grabbed my arm, trying to push past me, and I responded by shoving him backward into the coffee table. He stumbled but didn't fall, his face contorting with rage. "You think you're so smart," he snarled. "You think you've won something here. I think I've exposed two people for exactly what they are." Dean swung at me, a clumsy punch fueled by desperation and humiliation. I ducked easily, then grabbed his wrist and twisted, using his own momentum to send him sprawling across the floor. "Violence, Dean? Really? Is that your solution to every problem?" He struggled to his feet, his face flushed with embarrassment. The people on the video call were watching everything, recording Julia and Dean's complete meltdown for posterity. "Turn it off," Julia pleaded. "Please, Ethan, you've made your point." "Have I? Because you still seem to think this is about revenge instead of consequences." Another crash of thunder shook the building, and the lights went out completely. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting eerie shadows across the room. The laptop's battery kept the video call running, our audience still watching as Julia and Dean's world collapsed in real time. "You're sick," Dean said, backing toward the door. "This whole thing, it's psychotic. Is it? Or is it just the natural result of your choices? You wanted to play games with people's lives, to manipulate and deceive and steal. You just didn't expect your victims to fight back." Julia was sobbing now, her perfect composure completely shattered. "I'm sorry," she said to the laptop camera, addressing our audience. "I'm so sorry for everything." "Sorry you got caught," I corrected. "Not sorry for what you did." Dean finally made it to the door, but I wasn't finished with him yet. Dean, I called out. One more thing. He turned back, his hand on the doorknob. If you ever contact my wife again, if you ever come near either of us, I'll release the rest of the evidence I have. Photos, videos, financial records showing how you've been stealing from your business partners. Your expo humiliation will seem like a pleasant memory compared to what I'll do to you next. He stared at me for a long moment, then fled into the storm. Julia remained in her chair, still crying, still trying to explain herself to the people on the video call. But it was too late for explanations. Her reputation was destroyed, her career was over, and her marriage was finished. Did you really think I'd let you decide when we talk? I asked, standing over her as lightning illuminated the room. Consider this our last conversation. I closed the laptop, ending the video call, and looked down at my wife. She seemed smaller somehow, diminished by the exposure of her true nature. What happens now? She whispered. Now you live with the consequences of your choices, just like everyone else. The storm raged outside, but inside our apartment, everything was finally calm, the game was over, the truth was revealed, and justice had been served. Julia had wanted to control when we talked, when we spent time together, when I was allowed to matter in my own marriage. She'd gotten exactly what she asked for. I had decided when we would have our final conversation, and now it was finished. As I watched her gather her things and prepare to leave our home forever, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The thunder was breaking outside, but the storm in my life was finally over.